Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Mumbai Angels Network's Reboot 2 Industry Edition, a series of events focused on the challenges and opportunities for specific sectors in the new normal. Before we begin, I request all of you to please keep your devices on mute to ensure you hear the speakers clearly. The session is divided into 40 minutes of panel and 20 minutes of Q&A. Do send in your questions via chat so our team can curate them, and we'll try our best to get it answered by our panelists. The sector in focus today is fintech. Fear is a powerful factor that creates a fundamental shift in human behavior, or as the human brain is hardwired to avoid loss. Scientists and behavioral economists call this the loss aversion. We are seeing this trend play out real time as the COVID-19 contagion accelerates globally. People are adopting technology at a pace that they have never done before. Online activities and transactions are no longer a convenience factor but a necessity. As people adapt to a digital lifestyle, so too they will expect the same convenience and seamless experience from other areas of life, including financial services. And this is where our panel for today comes in. The panelists for this session are Jayavardhan Sambedu, co-founder and CTO, Curl Analytics. Curl is a company that works on machine learning, blockchain, and IoT. Jay has over 15 years of experience in the banking and financial services industry. In his previous stints, he has worked for global banking majors such as Deutsche Bank, RBS, UBS, Citizens Bank, and Societe Generale. The next panelist is Prasanna Lohar, Innovation Head and Technical Architect at DCB Bank. Prasanna practices innovation and implementation, architecture, and orchestration at DCB. He has over 17 years of industry experience and has bagged many leadership awards, top 50 CIO, top 100 CISO, and Digital Leader of the Year in the banking sector. Vikram Pandya, Director of FinTech at SP Jain School of Global Management, is our third panelist for today. Vikram is Director of FinTech at SP Jain, where he has designed Asia's first interactive classroom-led FinTech program featuring blockchain, API banking, AI/ML, and IoT labs. He has an extensive experience in banking, financial services, fintech, consultancy, and training domains. He is a fintech ambassador for Maharashtra government's Uday Fintech platform. The session for today will be moderated by Sudhin Baraukar, who is a global IT and innovation advisor. Sudhin is an emerging tech innovator, having served as head of innovation and as senior technology with SBI, Barclays Bank, IBM, and GE. Currently, he serves as IT and innovation advisor to global banks and fintechs and chairs the BankChain Alliance, which is established to collaborate and co-develop blockchain solutions for 30 plus global banks. Founder of deep tech startup BankChainAsset.com and AIOTF.io. I would like to thank our panelists for their time and giving us and our audience this opportunity to learn from their experience and insights. Without taking any more time, let's start the session with a final reminder to all participants to mute their microphones and to share their questions via chat. Over to you, Sudhin.
Thank you. Thank you, Shivangi. So let's start with I'll just give a quick state of the union, mini state of the union in the post-COVID world. And in fact, it just brings back to some of the work that we did in banks. And all the panelists would be part of all the digital transformation and the innovations that we did in the banks, especially in the BFSI space. And we can see today that all the mission critical banking services work perfectly well. And we from home can just make a few clicks and get all the transactions delivered successfully. So let me move on to moving from a domain tech perspective to a deep tech perspective, right? Of course, the fintechs today are challenged by something called as a perfect storm, wherein you have reduced interest rates and you have a worsening credit risk position. So, Jay, what is the advice that you would really want, or what is the roadmap or the vision that you would want to have fintechs in the face of a post-COVID world, and how do they really adapt and survive and then prosper in this situation?
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for the question. And definitely, this sort of a black swan event has put all our plans, out of the window. We all had a certain way in which things would pan out, but things as a fintech, you're now impacted at many levels. One, at your own funding and survival of your firm. That's one major aspect. And two, your customers who were reliant on your services are now looking at a lot more challenges in their environments in which they're operating. And finally, you have a counterparty related risk as well, where you're dealing with someone who ultimately may not be able to pay. So you have a whole lot of challenges as a fintech. You definitely are under immense stress compared to many other times in the recent past. But we see, like every crisis, there's always been a massive opportunity. We're now seeing a massive push in terms of adopting and embracing solutions that were designed for, let's say, 5 to 10 years down the line, pretty much in the space of DLT-backed solutions where trust-based, payments can be made a lot more faster. Now we are finding a lot more requests coming in that space where digital identity is taking a lot of importance, because online payments are becoming, online shopping is going to grow rampantly. And as you can see, with sort of fears coming in, with online shopping growing up, the payments and the need to ensure that digital identity is maintained, and a whole lot of products that had a roadmap which were coming into play, let's say 5 to 10 years down the line, are all getting accelerated to now identify uniquely where there is an identity related requirement. So we see a big surge in terms of online payments and necessary to provide identity management for them. We're also seeing a huge amount of traction in avenues such as fraud prevention, because again that comes into the realms of where we are seeing huge amount of work coming into play. We're also seeing a big trend in terms of cybersecurity related requirements, not just for protection of malicious attacks on fintech related payments, but overall for an organization in the realms of where they are trying to operate. What sort of cybersecurity related models need to be put in place. These were all generally put as a back burner in many companies, immediate requirements, but are taking center stage today. And of course, with we all being pushed towards the work from home kind of a scenario, there is more and more requirement for putting in tools for monitoring to ensure data leakages are prevented. So there's a whole lot of opportunities that are coming in at multiple levels. I'm expanding the scope slightly beyond fintech because the scope of what I'm trying to say impacts fintech companies, and these are all things that we are seeing immediate traction in. So then, to just give you immediate view on where we are.
Thanks, Ajay. So the question to Vikram is, and this is a very important, critical, piece of it when we do financial modeling, when we do economic modeling, when we build up growth models, right? We have been in the past using data at rest or financial services logical model, which has served us very well. I can tell you that from my experience in State Bank of India and Barclays, both these models have served us very well, and even today serve us very well on the run side of the organization, right, or the run side of the bank. My question is that how do we use all this data in motion and look at the VUCA world and then try to create these models on the fly so as to help both the demand side of it and the supply side of it, which is very critical in a place like in a where fintechs may sometimes not as in banks, but bring along the deep tech with it, which can do probably a better job, at least for data in motion. So how is this to be approached? There are a lot of startups who are very good in doing the technology, but a lot of them would have to look at what models they bring and how they can survive this storm and bring out the best collaboration that there is for them to prosper.
Sure. Thanks, Sudhin. So I will divide this question into two parts. First of all, what is that corporates and banks can do, where they can identify the synergies with startups, and then where startups can get benefit out of the ecosystem players which are there today. So to begin with, I will say that today, look, banks are, as we know, are less agile. They are not that fast they can move. Of course, banks are having more advanced systems, more security in place, etc. So that also helps in long run, because when they work along with some of the products which they are launching with the banks, at that point in time it gets validated also, and then at the later moment you can also scale it up easily. Now, when you look at today, there is one initiative which we are running called Connextdoor with Abhishant Pant and some of the other players, which allows startups to identify the potential partnership, mentorship opportunities available in the ecosystem, as well as if, let's say, the startup somehow is not able to continue and would like to dissolve and then, let's say, become part of another startup, then also there is an opportunity which is available, because not every startup can survive in this storm, right? So the idea is that we can at least remove the bad impact of that dissolve, whatever impact is out of that or fallout is out of that. We want to make sure that. So that is one thing. Second is from the bank's perspective. When you look at, there are so many banks which are approaching us in terms of couple of things. Number one is that we want to launch this product. I will give you an example. So when this COVID started, so they wanted to launch this COVID insurance product with some of these insurance companies. Now, when you want to integrate your systems, sometimes what happens is that integration is not that quick, and it takes time. Given specifically given that under COVID-19 scenario, you had fewer people working for you. So there are startups like Discovery, and there are startups which provide API layers to this. And using that, most of the banks and most of the distributors, B2B distributors also were able to easily integrate this insurance product, COVID-19 insurance product, and they were live within couple of days. That is something which is very promising in my opinion. And in going forward also, when you look at, right, let me give you one more example. So this Swiggy Genie, which we have seen, right, how their work is as simple as you provide certain things. They go to the local Kiryana wala and then they provide you the service at your society doorstep. So when you look at something like this also, the fintech element is already integrated within that. But the issue was always that how do you verify that the products which you have ordered are there or not, right? So they are doing this WhatsApp live call, and then they are trying to show it to you that okay, all these products are there in the place, and Paytm or some other players who are there already are acting as a payment provider in this entire ecosystem. Even the WhatsApp is there, right? So this overall provides you better ecosystem to suddenly innovate across certain things. Over
So
to you,
Vikram,
Sudhin.
Vikram, we've been seeing, when I was in State Bank heading the innovation in 2017, we launched 3 hackathons. We gave a lot of prizes. We also had a startup fund. So this is already being, the support is coming in from corporates and banks, to help the fintech community. But my question is a little different, and for the interest of the fintech community world, and a lot of them are in the Mumbai Angels ecosystem. What is exactly the academia doing? From my knowledge, we have 10,000 crores given by grants by the government to all the academia, right? Whether it's an institution or organization, but we've hardly seen any money being dispersed or spent, or the levels of collaboration still need to be much more expanded in a situation where a lot of the banks and organizations are going to conserve money, meaning that they are going to be, and obviously you can't blame them because of the position that everybody is in. And can the academia really, use this grant or use this money to even further expedite? I'm not saying that it's it's already, can we use this money for some of the innovations or some of the newer tech that can come along? What can be done?
Sure. So while we are international university, I will still give answer in perspective of the Indian universities or Indian institutions which are there. So I will tell you that number one, today what is happening, most of this IITs or IIMs have their incubation center, and they are trying to provide whatever help they can give in terms of incubating product. The second is that they are already working with some of these industry players to identify the problem statements which they are facing, and then making sure that startups are solving those specific problems rather than something which they are fencing around or whatever this something which they are filling. Right? We don't want to create a solution for the problem which are not existing in the real world. So that is what they are doing. Third is about the skill development. So National Skill Development Center, for example, is working with most of these other second tier institutions and even the rural ones to make sure that the last mile impact of this training is there, and the skill development in specific segment and sector is now looking much better, because when you look at even in tier 2 3 cities, we have seen the skill development progress happening much faster, and that is very very good. In fact, Swayam, you must be aware about that. Swayam is catering more than 5 million people now. So that is something which is good. And when you look at on the practical side of it, I personally believe much has been done, but much is yet to be done. And you can still say that, okay, today you want to create a program which is designed for industry requirement by industry, in that program are taken by the industry people. We don't have such programs in place as such, because most of the times you can't generalize these programs, right? And people or institutions would like to create programs which are catering to general audience or wider audiences. So we want to have a scenario where industry is working with academia to create sharply focused program which will allow this industry newcomers in this industry, and then going forward it can create wider audiences for this program.
So I think all the panelists on this panel, let's collaborate and let's take this ahead. Okay, I can assure you I will give in my best ideas to take this forward. So thanks. Prasanna, who's joined us. Prasanna, the question from one of the participants is, this is from P.N. Shetty, CEO of Rupee Boss, and would like to check on what are the new developments in fintech post the COVID world. And the second question is that what are the main factors which will really determine the success of digital lending platforms in the short term? And would also like to hear from your bank's perspective and from the industry perspective as to how does COVID change everything? Because we have been having a lot of fintechs who are into crowdsourcing or who are into lending. They lend at they borrow directly or indirectly at a very high rate, and they lend at a very high rate. And now with the credit risk, going completely, the credit risk models completely going out of whack and sync, that's going to create a problem. Secondly, is it that we need to, is it that these fintechs can be better focused on things like supply chain financing, especially if maybe small financing to, kirana shops or to even delivery guys or to that kind of ecosystem? Because that's where that's still surviving and prospering. So how do you see this change? What are the top two things that you would recommend fintechs to really adapt to this new world and take it forward?
Yeah, I think Sudhin, very good morning to you and everyone. And I think the situation today is quite different. We never faced that situation in the past, at least this generation, at least in India. Considering that, I think fintechs and even financial industry and almost every type of industry is impacting because of a COVID transformation. And I think you will see post-COVID. I'm not sure when and how far this COVID will go on. But I think post-COVID, we will see different kind of business models. And even the situation or a customer who was driving their services on with the banks or in fintech, the customer behavior is changing during COVID. The customer who was visiting to branches or customer who was ordering something on Swiggy or any other apps. So whole supply chain is collapsed during the COVID time. And I think considering that aspect, you will see that huge impact on a fintech industry in India. Many projects are in a pipeline, but because of other priority, banks may not concentrate on those projects. Those fintechs will have a huge impact. Usually it takes for a fintech or a startups, they can align their cash, they can align their investment for 2 to 3 months in a one go. So I think the situation will be difficult from here on. After 2 to 3 months, how the survival will happen. I think I was hearing views from Jay and Vikram also. Considering those facts, I think fintechs has to see the 5-stage plan for themselves. In the first stage, they need to see, are they really geared up for their employees and their existing customers, their business models for a stage one where are they communicating each other? Are they aligned with the customer engagement? So I think that's a very much important for them to as a step one. Step two, they need to see once they are ready. Once they are ready in the COVID period, are they running their day-to-day operations? Are they running their day-to-day projects? If not, I think that's a very dangerous situation for a fintechs. So stage three is that they need to have a some crisis management plan. What is that they gonna do? Are they really working on their existing cash? They need to save a lot of cash. If the fintechs are looking for investment, I think this is not the right time for them to ask for investment, but this is the right time for fintechs to talk with the various mentors and various investor what is they are expecting post COVID and ready make their pitch ready for that. So I think this time is for a lot of readiness, what to do for a post COVID. Some of the fintechs can look at their current business models, how government and regulation is gonna come with a lot of changes. As we have seen, a lot of things are happening on digital onboarding or video KYC or even on the lending part or account aggregator part. I think they have to tweak their business models, their relevant infrastructure readiness based upon the futuristic requirement. That is what I will call it as a stage 4. They need to look at what's really happening. And stage 5, they need to really see post COVID, what is their business model, their offerings will be. So I think stage 3 is very critical for all the fintechs to be ready with the crisis management plan. What are their best things to do, the collaborate with other fintechs, collaborate with some of the BFSI industry, engage with them, offer them some free POCs or POCs where they can learn out of that proof of concepts. So fintechs who are widely on a mature hello.
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So fintechs who are quite matured, I think for them it will not be much challenge. But I think 90 to 95% fintech industry will have a lot of impact because of COVID. What's happening at the banking side is that banks or BFSI industry is looking for how they can offer right set of services during COVID. Say example, same customer who is not willing to come to branches or gonna do fund transfers or going to come on a digital channel. So they need to see that whether their infrastructure are adequate for this huge number of transactions. That goes same for fintechs also. Another thing is that how frontline staff of a bank can really engage a customer either to lead management app or on a video kind of conferencing with potential customers or existing customers. They need to see how banks will be ready with more cash or liquidation, how it will happen. So I think banks are looking at how to create all these services which are available on the branch, either on mobile banking or internet banking, or create a new collaboration with any of the fintechs, how they can onboard a customer with the video KYC. I think in next 2-3 months we must see that video KYC becomes some mandatory action from a regulator side, because that will resolve a lot of challenges on field. You don't have to really visit a customer. You can save on that operational cost, and with video QC, you will save a lot. I think this is what we will learn from today's situation. Another thing, what we are seeing, that customer who were visiting branches or coming out of the home, they are glued with a lot of mobile gadgets. So who are going to watch movies for cinema theaters or doing shopping on a open bazaar, so they are now glued to the some of the apps who are helping their lifestyle in the recent days. Most of the millennials and the customers who are not utilizing Netflix are on Netflix or similar kind of apps. The guys who are going for the shopping into the shopping malls, they are ordering that thing from home on those apps. So I think that's a new way to really see the customer is moving more towards invisible interfaces. So I think so banks need to ready for conversational or chatbot or instant services on the digital channels wherever customer is going. I think that's what I'll see, that adoption of AI and ML will be huge, so that I can understand what customers behavior today, tomorrow, or here on. So I think adoption of AI, ML will be huge at a bank level. One more thing, Sudhin, I want to talk about supply chain. You said, right? So I think supply chain is broken everywhere today. It starts from the production of goods or products until it reaches to the end customer. You will see it will hamper economy of a country or multiple countries. I think that way we will look at how the whole supply chain can come on a same network. And I think Jay can add his own inputs, or you also can add inputs, like blockchain kind of a phenomena or a concept will be adopted by many governments and many countries. And I think we have seen that adoption is really happening. Say example, in a banks also today, we have some kind of a operational process. After payment, we do some kind of operational process of reconciliation settlement. And even if for a customer transaction happens on a website or on a e-commerce app, back in it, there is a lot of manual error, manual operations are involved. At times it's error prone, at times it generates some of the disputes wherein contact center is involved. I think coming in some kind of a blockchain kind of a infrastructure wherein your transaction is happening, settlement is happening there, and there itself we will reduce lot of manpower, lot of cost for one bank on a daily basis. You can imagine how much we will save for years together. I think similar
Yeah.
kind of a experience we will learn not only for a banking but almost for every type of industry. More and more automation will happen, adoption of RPA, adoption of AI, adoption of blockchain. I think those fintechs are startups who will survive this COVID. I must say that they will emerge as a very good, strong startups and fintechs here on. And I think last line from my side, collaboration is a mantra this time for a fintechs. Reskill your key resources, ask them to learn more, look at your infrastructures, how they will be robust post COVID. Keep engaging startup domain experts and banks for their initiatives. And I think over a period of next 1 year, AI, ML, big data, blockchain, IoT, all these technologies, will call it as a traditional technologies. We will never say these now emerging technologies, because everybody will understand that importance. And I think certainly government will impose so many innovations, either through NITI Aayog, or either through NPCI, or either through IDRBT. These things should help
Yeah.
last mile customer who is sitting somewhere in one village, so that he also benefited out of financial services. And you will see many more models will arise. Say example, marketplace banking, or say example, partnership banking, or everyday banking, which will have many more partners attached to this. So I
Yeah,
think
thanks,
it will be
Prasanna.
a
Let's
great time.
move on to the
Yeah.
next question, because I think we
Yeah.
run short of time otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
before- yeah, before I want to share, I just wanted to share the experience that I've had working in big banks. So in State Bank of India, we benchmarked on the run side, we benchmarked our core banking systems at about 24,000 transactions per second, or 1.5 billion transactions a day, to serve more than 400 million plus customers and 600 million plus accounts, right? All this technology is made in India by Indian technologists. And as you can see, if they, so the question really to Jay and Vikram, and Jay can go first, is we've seen on the run side all our scalability, our security, our mission critical services. What do you really feel is the adoption of emerging tech? Right? What is the adoption of emerging tech? Should it not align with really mission critical services rather than focusing on, right now it should really probably focus more on the risk management and the credit lending side rather than some of the anyway happening. But don't you think it should be the mission critical services that fintechs can really try to focus on or collaborate with banks to do that? Vikram, you can also add in if that's the right approach.
Okay, thanks, Sudhin. What we are definitely seeing is, yes, in fact, many banks have already started embracing emerging technologies to basically partner with what was a traditional sort of model, what they had, and traditional technology usages to augment what was being done and reimagine some of the value chains. And we can clearly see there is a role that fintechs can play with what they have been doing in the other segments. But we also see these sort of systems that are very mission critical to the bank lie entrenched within the core IT infrastructures of these banks. And generally, banks are a bit wary of approaching a startup with not a great track record for almost like 5-10 years to actually partner with them. So you have a little bit of a chicken and egg kind of a problem when actually a startup we have the skill sets to really mine that information and find out new models that can be applied. But you also have a traditional mindset in some of the decision-making authorities in the banks who don't see that as these fintechs may be in a position to help them directly. So perhaps if they can carve it out, like what SBI was doing at one point, or DCB was trying to do, where you create those sort of models where you can engage with the startup in a curated use case, where you can test their abilities by creating sandbox sort of environments, thereby limiting any risks to your core infra, and also providing access to the fintechs to participate. And from my experience in Society General, this is what we did. We created and carved out a separate environment. We ran a program called Catalyst, which was very similar to to things that was run by other banks as well. But we isolated use cases where data could be shared. We anonymized it. We created sandboxes, and that really helped a fintech participate. And today, although I moved out of SocGen, I can clearly say many of the startups that worked with us at that point have gone on to do a lot more things in the space of KYC, in the areas of trade finance, in the area of fraud prevention, and many other digital processes that we were looking at reimagining. Fintechs now have an opportunity because we changed our mindset to engage with the fintech than stating that they should come and align to all the requirements we had. So
Vikram, we have been seeing such a shock event or a black swan event, or I call it the biggest complex event ever in the form of COVID, right? And everybody has to readapt, whether big or small. My question is a little different. My question is based on what we've been hearing from news and what we have been getting from the regulators and authorities. Is a lot needs to be understood, because, for example, they've been saying that it's the real banking which they really want to focus on. And real banking means, what does it mean? What does real banking mean? Does it just mean banks or government banks or some private banks? Does it not include the NBFC ecosystem? Does it not include the fintech ecosystem, right? I think this is, this comes at a time where, the entire ecosystem needs to be supported, by the authorities and the regulators. Don't you think that a lot needs to be done in the RegTech space, in the risk management space, in the, trying to bring out probably newer regulations based more on data and data science than what we've been used to in the past? And since you are part of the academia ecosystem, is that something that needs to really happen so that fintechs can get the real message and can focus on really what is what the authorities and regulators really want them to do?
So good question, Sudhin. I will tell you that first of all, I have also more than a decade of banking experience, so I can relate to that what you are saying. I personally believe when they are talking about banking, they are talking about banking ecosystem. That's what I personally believe as such. But when you look at
Can someone else take the question while Vikram is facing his?
am I audible?
Yeah, Vikram, we can hear you
Okay,
now.
great.
Yeah, better
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying that first of all, I don't know how much you heard, but I will repeat myself. Just saying that we can always divide this into the proper banking ecosystem. I personally believe by banking ecosystem, the government implied normal banking channels and MFIs and NBFCs. I don't know whether they included fintechs into that. But given whatever the way they are acting, at least it means that fintechs are not directly included as such. But when you look at the risk management practices, given that I also have more than a decade of banking experience, I have seen now banks, especially uh, let's say in the post-COVID scenario, they are looking at risk management very differently. Even the fintechs and NBFCs are looking at risk management differently. Number one, because traditional cash flow based lending is no longer the right way to look at this, because cash flows are itself under question mark. So what we are looking at is that how people can devise certain models which takes into account not only cash flow but also the current net worth position, which otherwise is not considered. So I have seen multiple companies or startups and banks are now looking at both cash flow based plus net worth based lending, because the cash flow itself was an issue, right? I've seen couple of startups. I'll give you an example. Let's say one startup was mainly doing B2B business. They were profitable at unit economics. But what happened is because of this COVID scenario, both Uber and Ola have stopped working. And because of that, since their main lending business was to their drivers, suddenly they had to vanish from the ecosystem, mainly because of a couple of reasons. When we talk about burning rate normally decides the mileage which startup can maintain in their life cycle. Today, burning rate is nothing but your revenue minus your operating expenses in a way. So when you look at current burning rate, right, the revenue has almost dried down and the OPEX is still there. So suddenly the startups which are looking at maybe 1 year of mileage or 2 years of mileage are suddenly looking at 4 month mileage, 6 month mileage. And venture capital people are also looking at Darwinian approach, where survival of the fittest they are looking at, and then they will invest into them, right? So they are also right now not opening their purses, and they are waiting for people to look at how the ecosystem works and how people are surviving, and later on they will invest. So this is also creating certain issues in the ecosystem. And when you look at the supervisory side of it, right, the regtech side of it, so I will tell you very clearly that it will change. Surely it will change. First of all, subtech, supervisory tech, the regulator will soon, as we speak, it is happening, will soon start with pull-based approach rather than push-based approach. Today, when I say push-based, RBI says you are supposed to submit 300 reports in 1 year. Today, when you look at those 300 reports, most of the reports are having common fields, overlapping fields. Instead, what RBI or some other regulators across the world are doing is that they are telling, look, this is a taxonomy. You you map this taxonomy to your ERP, and there are certain reports where you don't need to change certain later on, like top 20 depositors or certain different numbers, right? So when you look at those numbers are now pull based. Whenever RBI or regulator wants, they can simply pull rather than telling them, okay, please submit these reports, right? This is already happening, and we will see that happening further. On the RegTech side, further, I will say that risk management I already mentioned, but on the compliance side, we are also looking at different digital solutions in compliance. GDPR is already there, as you know, and even in India, very soon you will have PDPB converted into Act. And when that comes, you will also see further refinement into approach which startups are taking. Even the account aggregator model, Samati, once it is in place, you will again see major movement happening in terms of the ecosystem players and how ecosystem interacts with each other, right? So those things will be in place for sure. Over to you, Sudhin.
Thank you, panelists. Thanks, Sudhin. I
Yeah.
think it's time that we move to the question and answer session. So we do have a
Sure.
few questions which have come in from the live audience. I would like to first pose that to the panelists, and then we can look at the other questions which were shared over the previous days. So the first question is for Jay. The question is that what will be the top 3 areas that are expected to lead lending growth for banks and NBFCs? And with Amazon Pay, Jio, Facebook, and other deep pocket companies stepping into the credit segment, what is the scope to start a new loan, MF, or insurance marketplace? Any comments on that?
Thank you, Shivangi. We see definitely there are a few areas that is going to gain massively in the area owing to COVID, and anyone who had a head start in those areas are going to stand to benefit immensely. The first segment we see is in the online shopping and robot deliveries itself. Although there are really major players coming in, the last segment, which is robot deliveries, which are now becoming a lot more cognizant. And in fact, one of the products that divisions we have is a drone delivery based model. And we are now working very closely with DGCA, and we are one of the 13 companies who have been given rights to carry out beyond visual line of sight flights. For drones, we are establishing drone corridors so that the transportation to the last mile can be done a lot more seamlessly. And this we had put in place much before the COVID situation came into play. But now that is going to be relooked for a variety of purposes, from retail deliveries to all the way to medical supplies, and in areas like surveillance. There's a whole lot of things where drones are going to play a crucial role. So in terms of online shopping and robot deliveries, we definitely see a big set of things that are going to be the lending in that space. I think this is a good segment to watch out for. The second one is the overall supply chain piece of it itself. Now, this I mentioned about the last mile connectivity, but there's a lot of elements in the supply chain. And I have been working in the DLT based solutions for a while. And very recently, I was one of the core contributors to a World Economic Forum based report that came out on deploying blockchain based solutions to some supply chain based systems in B2B space, trade finance related segments. How are we looking at reimagining it? So there is a big avenue in that sort of a mode as well. Of course, telehealth now has become another major segment where where we had some companies which had forayed into telehealth. Now almost every hospital has started to take a look at this as one of the ways in which they could engage with their customers. So these are 3 major segments, but I think there are a lot of allied segments. I mean, I would say things that could also be additionally watched out for. I mean, work from home, we take it for granted that today there are some solutions in the market which allow you to do it. But many of these solutions are definitely quite expensive, and in the long term, you need to evaluate the holistic view of whether it's possible or not. Many startups are entering in this space. In fact, the entire work from home solution for our company, we built it ourselves based on open source tools, and we almost paid nothing for it. And it is working quite robustly in an extremely IP sensitive sort of environments. We were able to use it and deploy it because of the kind of personnel we had. But there's a big segment coming in this space where work from home, whether COVID situation improves or not, there's the mechanism of mindset that you can work is going to exist, and that's one big agent. So these are the 4 areas I see. Now coming to the second part of the question, comparing to Facebook and Amazon Pay, all of this coming in, how is this going to really impact our scene, and should we be worried? I'll just give you an example of one of these companies, which you may not have heard of. In 2009, a company called Square came up, and this was done by Twitter's founder, Jack Dorsey, and another co-founder of his. And primarily, they were looking at a mobile payment gateway. And in 2009, it was slightly ahead of their curve. Now, when they did that, of course, there weren't many competitors, but along came Amazon in 2014 with a much deeper pocket, and they just came in and bulldozed the market out. They bought a much more stable sort of device. And of course, everyone assumed that Square will fold. But Square did one thing, and they did one thing really well. They understood the needs of their customer, and they went behind and catered to only what their customers needed. 2 years later, I think 3 years later, Amazon just rolled back the product called Local Register, and they never forayed into the same segment Square was in. So in a COVID or non-COVID, the David always have an advantage over the Goliath. And the advantage here is if you focus on your core needs of your customers, definitely you will have a space, not having to worry about the big boys in the block. So that would be my answer to this.
Thank you so much. The next question is for Prasanna. Prasanna, this is a question which is coming from one of our live viewer audience on the need for robust telecommunications infrastructure for financial institutions. Do you think this will increase over time? And is there scope for a startup which can help financial institutions actually build this communication infrastructure, make it more robust? How do you see this market play out? Do you think that there will be new entrants into this field? Prasanna, are you there?
He's on mute, I think.
Prasanna, could you unmute your microphone, please? We can't hear you. Would somebody else like to pick up this question while Prasanna is coming back online?
Yeah, I can take this.
Sure.
Yes,
Great.
I will take this.
Okay,
so very quickly, I will tell you, look, telecom, when you look at, right? So telecom is right now a necessity in a way. We know that because when we look at the infrastructure wise, everyone working from home means that we require high speed, stable internet. And as we have seen even during the call today, that sometimes it is not really helpful when there is a peaks and downs in the network connectivity. So that is required for sure. Second is that telecom providers also are looking at a couple of telecom providers are creating cloud working environment, and that cloud working environment will come with their own connection on ecosystem, and you will see this happening in future for sure. So like we are rolling out cloud campus, they are rolling out cloud workspace, and that cloud workspace is going to be, and also when you look at telecom provider in most of the other countries, you already know that they are also the payment components in this ecosystem directly that can create huge value for everyone involved, including startups. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Vikram. The next question is for the panel. I request whoever one of you to please pick it up. This is from one of our members. In terms of fintech adjusting the risk appetite in the context of COVID, do you think that borrowed funds are unlikely to be available at all times, and this would add stress to the lenders and the NBFCs? Is that more capital funds from investors would be the answer to this, or are there any other solutions available? What would be actually the solution to this compressed capital problem?
Yeah, so something like this is Sudan. So something like risk capital is risk appetite and risk management is the core of everything that you need to do in the BFSI space. Obviously, in a situation like this, those who can manage the risk better are going to definitely survive and prosper. I think fintechs need to really chase where the money is or where the restart or recovery is. And today, the restart and recovery is not in small loans or microfinancing where you give microfinance to millions and then expect them to pay back, which is not going to happen. But really, the money trail is more in the supply chain, more in the supply chain networks, right? And that's a space probably you need to shift your capital and your products to, because the other part of it is simply it's only players who are managing their risk better, who have enough liquidity and who have a stable profile of customers, I think those are going to do much better. So I think fintechs need to chase the money trail and go into supply chain financing. Go look at aspects where the recovery has happened, or which part of the system is still performing, where there is cash flow. In a position where there is no cash flow, no income, that's a definitive mass financial destruction of everything, right? So that's something that fintechs can ill afford. They must understand that right now the money trail is small, but it is still there. It will start recovering, but you need to chase what is alive in the ecosystem, what is what is surviving in the ecosystem. Only then will you be able to put your cash flow and income flow right.
Thanks,
Sure,
Sudhin.
Shivangi, I would like to add to what Sudhin said because it
Please.
incidentally answers another question on FLDG. So when you look at current ecosystem, right? So barring several PSU banks, you will see almost all the private sector banks are right now yeah, under the risk mitigation mode, and they are very risk averse. They are only granting loans to let's say pre-approved kind of a list which they already have maintained earlier, and they are not chasing anyone else. And when you look at even you must be reading in the news that several banks are reducing credit limits using big data analytics and ML. They are reducing the even the credit limits in credit card. And when you look at even the existing facilities which they have provided, they are reducing certain unutilized amount over there. So that is happening as we speak. Uh, Today, when you look at FLDG, right? So I have seen earlier the FLDG, whatever like 30% or 50% FLDG models were there in the market. Today I'm looking at 70 to 80% model or even 100% FLDG models. So that increase in FLDG requires borrowing from the market, and unfortunately today that liquidity is not available that much the way which you would like to have. And another point that I would like to make here is that when you look at on the long term basis, people will need to come out with some other model to make sure that this ecosystem is growing. This current ecosystem, the way it is working, has certain loopholes. Specifically, for example, when government is giving a guarantee for SMEs, when we are talking about that guarantee, right, we require also discounting happening, invoice discounting happening directly through that. Because I will tell you, most of the startups which I know are facing issues where they have raised invoices for big banks or big corporates, and those invoices are not getting paid even after 3 months. So the issue is that these are the good names, good corporate names, but the payout management is never on the time, right? You know that. And when you talk about a centralized discounting party, government can always create something like this, and it will help a lot, because I'm seeing this happening more and more. Over to you.
Thank you, Vikram. Incidentally, like one of the questions that had come up is, in India, we're still at a place where you need to actually visit a bank or visit a physical outlet to actually open your account to get the process started. Except for maybe a few e-wallets and things like that, everything else still requires that physical contact at the initial onset to start any process. And it requires identity verification and other such procedures. And since this directly impacts the whole fintech system, how do you see these processes evolve? Do you think India is actually poised to make that transaction to digital? Where, say, tomorrow, if I need to activate a new bank account or if I need to activate a new facility, and given the current scenario, actually visiting the branch and filling a form may not be possible. Though the bank has the back end in place in terms of all the fintech platforms, etc. Once this piece of paper is signed and verified, they can start the process. But I think the biggest roadblock that we would probably face at this point is getting the physical paper digital. So, any thoughts, views on actually how the financial system in India can make this transition?
Yes.
I can add here, and then maybe somebody else can add to that. Very quickly, look, we
So,
already have amazing infrastructure in terms of Aadhaar as well as DigiLocker and some of the other things. So I'm personally of the opinion that we can completely convert the current physical trail or KYC trail into digital. Also, we don't need to worry about any other documentation, because all these documents which we are talking about can be done through DigiLocker. And when you look at this ecosystem, even there is a place for private players. You can always have blockchain-based notary. You can always have blockchain-based document store, and all those things are possible. And document registry is already a good use case for blockchain. So, anyways, this is from my side. I think others can add.
Yeah, I think a lot of the banks have purely gone digital on account of opening. I think ECB also launched various applications like and other applications where you think opening corporate accounts is still chaotic. But I think on the B2C side, I think most of it has gone digital. I think probably we must circle to the banks and the RBI saying that in this crisis, I think there is the need to make it completely digital, so as to eliminate the need for to go to a physical branch and to even do the verification completely digital is possible. We have been using Aadhaar card and other identity proofs and validated them to open. It's possible, but I do confess that I think we need to make this completely digital going forward.
Yeah, Shivangi, to add one thing, what we as a part of our ML and deep learning stream, we built a product called Sara and Yati. All our products have Sanskrit names. Sara means extract, and Yati means to control. So essentially, these are solutions that we've deployed with many trade finance related firms. And now we are in discussion with a few banks as well. Primarily, the aim is, although right now the process you can directly latch onto, as Sudhin pointed out, on the Aadhaar and basically the India stack, you can leverage on that, which is one of the proudest, tech stacks that have been built across. And I think this is a huge advantage India has compared to many other countries out there, because the ability to have all of this on top of each other can actually help us open a lot more, many of these banking related services. But one step beyond that, even in corporate banking, which is, as Sudhin pointed out, is slightly more complex because it's B2B and many times there are cross-border transactions and you need to have a lot more permissions. What we're seeing is the paper-based documents, we have built some technology to extract data from those documents and make it more structured, which can directly feed into enterprise systems. We've also built in applications which can execute rules on top of it to flag anything that we think are anomalous. So the opportunity here is for companies involved in the space of OCR and rules that can be implemented, and compliance related ones is the opportunity. And we already have 2 products in that space. Shivangi, back to you. You're on mute, Shivangi.
We are coming to
Yes,
the
yes,
end of
ma'am.
our session. Any final thoughts, views that the panelists would like to share with the audience before I close? Maybe
I will give my closing comments, and I will also answer the 2 pending questions indirectly through that. So when we look at this post-COVID world, we will need to be in survival mode. We don't need to go ahead and invest into something which is not required. Look, co-working space, for example, is something which will suffer a lot because of this, given that people have identified that work from home is possible, and it is going to, of course, suffer. It is not going in co-working for sure. And for POS payment in India post COVID, you will see more QR code based and more uh, contactless payments happening. And when you look at UPI, everything is there in place, so that anyways provides a backbone for our payment economy. And going forward, you will see more innovation happening as solutioning rather than payment as a product. So payment solutions will be more and more available. That is it from my side.
Jay, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think in this times at least, it is very important. Everyone's going through this. So everyone's in this together. So at least for us as an organization, we transparently discussed with our employees to ensure that we froze some of our salary hikes, but ensured that there would be no job losses at all, because in the immediate requirement, it is quite essential to be transparent to your employees to see what is the strategy you're trying to execute as a company. That's one thing that we have done. But overall, we definitely think this is things are going to change in the sense that the business model itself will need to be relooked. But this is going to be more of an opportunity than just an outright challenge. And we need to be prepared for what is going to happen after that. Until then, conserving cash and deploying it smartly will be the best way to get rid of this problem.
Prasanna, would you like to give your final comments? I think Prasanna is still on mute. So then would you like to close the session and then I can conclude it?
Yeah. So, thanks. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity for even making everything digital. This is a fantastic opportunity for fintechs and startups and entrepreneurs to really leverage deep tech and emerging tech for real world problems. Look at how fintechs can allow in collaboration or with the ecosystem. If you focus on mission critical services, build your services and products around it. Look at credit modeling, lending, risk management, and all the stuff that is critical for the entire lending ecosystem. And you can shift the domain away from from just domain expertise to deep tech expertise. In fact, I will also recommend that that fintechs use two simple models. It's called the Complex Event Processing, CEP, which has been there for more than 15 years, and something like BRMS, Business Rules Management Systems, which can be integrated with your system of record and system of engagement. Probably use low code, no code to expedite your application development. So what you have been doing for 3 to 6 months can be reduced to 1-2 weeks. So this is a great chance for fintechs, for entrepreneurs to stick to what they're doing best, to use whatever available of deep tech and emerging tech. There are a lot of mentors and a lot of people who are very knowledgeable, both in the BFSI space as well as in the deep tech space. Collaborate with them and take your journey ahead.
Thank you, Sudhin. Thank you, Vikram, Prasanna, Jay, for your time and for sharing your insights and experience with the audience. It has been a very engaging session, and I would like to thank the audience as well for joining in, our members for their constant support, and of course, the team for curating it at the back. The next sector that we will focus on MA Reboot 2, the industry edition, will cover food and beverages. This is on the 8th of May at 11:30 a.m. We hope to see you all there again. Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.